Have you ever noticed how some people command respect without uttering a single word? They don't beg for attention. They don't chase validation. They simply withdraw. And in that withdrawal, everything around them changes. The atmosphere shifts. People who once took them for granted suddenly start to question, to wonder, to feel the weight of their absence. The atmosphere shifts. People who once took them for granted suddenly start to question, to wonder, to feel the weight of their absence. Now imagine if you did the same. What if instead of always responding, always explaining, always being available, you chose silence? What if instead of immediate reaction, you offered thoughtful withdrawal? The world around you would suddenly find itself in crisis because people have grown accustomed to controlling you through your predictability, through your constant availability, through your desperate need to be understood. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." This awakening begins when you stop being accessible to everyone and everything, when you reclaim sovereignty over your own energy. But make no mistake, this isn't about turning your back on the world or running away from connection. This is about becoming selective with your presence, intentional with your energy, deliberate with your time. It's about understanding that your value isn't determined by how available you are, but by how authentic you remain when the world demands that you compromise. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to walk you through why your silence is far more powerful than your words, why your absence can speak volumes, and why the path to true strength begins when you stop trying to be understood by those who are never truly trying to understand you. This isn't just philosophy. This is psychological alchemy, the transformation of your perceived weakness into unshakable power, the journey from validation seeking to self-sovereignty, the brutal truth about why silence makes you valuable in a world that profits from your noise. So let me ask you now, as you look within, how long will you continue giving pieces of yourself away to those who don't value what they receive? How long will you remain accessible to those who only access you when it serves them? Perhaps it's time to cut those strings, to withdraw, to become the mystery that others must earn the right to solve. Because when you stop being available to everyone, you become invaluable to the few who truly matter. When you first begin to withdraw, to set boundaries, to protect your energy through conscious silence, the world responds in predictable ways. People who once took your availability for granted suddenly become confused, worried, and even critical of your change. What's wrong with you? They ask. Why are you being so distant? They demand. You've changed, they accuse. But what they're really saying is, you've stopped playing the role I assigned to you. And now I don't know how to relate to the real you. This reaction isn't about you. It's about them. It's about the disruption you've caused in their comfortable understanding of who you are and how you function in their narrative. Jung understood this when he wrote about projections, how we unconsciously place parts of ourselves onto others and then react to those projections rather than to the actual person. When you withdraw, you force others to confront the reality that they never truly knew you. They were interacting with a projection, a character in their story, a tool for their convenience. Your silence strips away the illusion, leaving them disoriented and often resentful. Consider the friend who only reaches out when they need emotional support, never asking about your life, or the partner who expects you to be their constant source of validation, or the family member who demands your time without respect for your boundaries. When you stop fulfilling these roles, they don't miss you, miss the function you served. Jung observed that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So when someone becomes irritated by your newfound boundaries, by your selective silence, by your conscious unavailability, They are revealing more about themselves than about you. They are showing you how much they depended on your imbalance, how comfortable they were with your self-sacrifice, and how entitled they felt to your energy. And in this revelation lies your first liberation, the recognition that their reaction to your withdrawal is precisely why that withdrawal was necessary. The world responds to your silence, not because it values your voice, but because it misses the use of it. People don't chase after what they appreciate. They chase after what they can no longer control. And in that chasing, they reveal the truth of your previous relationship. It wasn't about connection. It was about utility. This discomfort is necessary. This tension is productive. This conflict is illuminating. Because in witnessing how others respond to your boundaries, you learn who truly respects you and who merely wanted access to you. You discover who values your essence and who only valued your usefulness. The most profound shift occurs not in how others see you, but in how you begin to see yourself, no longer as an emotional service provider, constantly available for the convenience of others, but as a sovereign being with limited energy that must be protected, directed, and invested wisely. Your worth is not determined by your utility to others, but by your integrity to yourself. Since childhood, you've been conditioned to believe that your value lies in your availability. Be a good friend, always be there. Be a good partner, always respond. Be a good employee, always say yes. The message is clear. Your worth is measured by how much of yourself you're willing to give away. But Jung understood a fundamental truth about human psychology, that which is too available becomes devalued. He wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no universal recipe for living. Yet modern society pushes a universal expectation. Be constantly accessible, eternally understanding, perpetually accommodating. Be constantly accessible, eternally understanding, perpetually accommodating. This excessive availability comes at a devastating cost. Every time you respond immediately to that message that could wait, every time you say yes when your soul is screaming no, every time you engage in an argument that doesn't deserve your energy, you're making a withdrawal from your limited reservoir of vital force. Jung called this psychic energy, the life force that animates your being, fuels your creativity, and sustains your inner light. This energy is not infinite when you spread it too thin, when you distribute it without discrimination, when you leak it into spaces and relationships that don't reciprocate. You end each day depleted, frustrated, and somehow empty in ways you can't quite articulate. Look around at the people who command genuine respect. They aren't the ones who are always available, always explaining, always seeking approval. They are selective with their presence. Their yes means something because they aren't afraid to say no. Their words carry weight because they aren't afraid of silence. The predictability that comes with constant availability makes you a tool rather than a presence. People start to use you as an emotional utility, pressing your buttons when they need validation, attention, or relief, then placing you back on the shelf until you're useful again. And in this process of being used without being valued, you slowly disappear. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually. Erosion rather than earthquake. You become a ghost of yourself, present in body but absent in spirit, going through the motions of connection without feeling the depth of it. The tragedy is not just that others fail to notice this disappearance. It's that you stop noticing it yourself. You become so accustomed to serving others that you forget how to serve your own soul. You become so practiced at responding to external demands that you forget how to listen to internal wisdom. Jung observed that the greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. The problem of being overextended, over-available, over-accommodating cannot be solved through better time management or more efficient communication. It can only be outgrown through the development of a stronger sense of self. This stronger self begins to emerge when you realize that your energy is sacred, that your time is finite, that your attention is valuable, and most importantly, that you don't owe these precious resources to anyone who hasn't proven worthy of receiving them. The world takes from you exactly what you allow it to take. When you place no boundaries around your energy, you shouldn't be surprised when there's nothing left at the end of the day. When you respond to every summons, you shouldn't be shocked when you feel more like a service than a person. The cost of always being there is nothing less than your life force itself. And no relationship, no approval, no external validation is worth that price. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is communication in its most refined form. Not the silence of avoidance or cowardice, but the silence of strategy, of conscious choice, of deliberate withdrawal. This is what Jung might have called active silence. Not an empty void, but a space filled with intention. When you choose silence as a strategy, you break the predictable patterns that have defined your relationships. You stop reacting immediately, stop explaining excessively, stop defending unnecessarily. And in that stopping, something remarkable happens. You create space for others to confront themselves. In Jung's understanding of psychology, most human interactions are built on projections, unconscious transfer of our own qualities onto others. When someone has come to expect your immediate response, your consistent validation, your reliable emotional labor, they aren't relating to you. They're relating to a projection of what they need you to be. Your strategic silence disrupts this projection. It forces others to see the gap between who you actually are and who they've needed you to be, and this confrontation is deeply uncomfortable. Not for you, but for them. Because suddenly, without your reflexive reaction to push against, they're left facing their own neediness, their own expectations, their own unconscious demands. Consider how uncomfortable silence becomes in a conversation where someone is attempting to manipulate you, to extract something from you, to enlist you in their drama. Your silence is not cruelty, it's clarity. You're refusing to participate in a dynamic that diminishes you, refusing to feed a cycle that depletes you, refusing to validate a narrative that isn't true. Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your habitual patterns of overgiving, over-explaining, and over-accommodating aren't fate. They're unconscious programming. And strategic silence is the tool that brings this programming into consciousness, where it can be examined and transformed. Notice what happens within you when you choose not to respond immediately. The initial anxiety, the conditioned fear that you're doing something wrong by not being instantly available. The guilt, the internalized belief that your needs matter less than others. The relief, the soul-deep recognition that you're reclaiming something essential. And notice what happens around you. Those who truly value your presence will respect your boundaries. Those who only valued your utility will become uncomfortable, perhaps even hostile. The manipulator will escalate their tactics. The energy vampire will seek easier prey. The controller will attempt to reassert dominance. This is not a test you're giving others. It's a truth you're revealing about relationships that may have seemed balanced, but were actually extractive. Your silence doesn't create these dynamics. It merely exposes what was already there, hidden beneath the surface of your constant availability. Strategic silence serves another crucial function. It creates the space necessary for self-reflection. When you're constantly responding, constantly processing external input, constantly managing others' emotions, You have no room to hear your own inner voice, no capacity to discern your authentic desires from your conditioned responses. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Jung reminded us, but this clarity requires stillness. It demands periods of withdrawal from external noise. It necessitates the courage to sit with yourself, to listen to the wisdom that emerges not from reaction, but from reflection. In this silence, you begin to distinguish between relationships that nourish you and those that deplete you. You start to recognize the difference between genuine connection and habitual attachment. You develop the discernment to identify when you're being related to as a person versus when you're being utilized as a function. The strategic aspect of silence lies in its selectivity. This isn't about it becoming a hermit or cutting off all communication. It's about becoming intentional, responding when it serves your integrity rather than when it soothes someone else's insecurity, engaging when it aligns with your values rather than when it alleviates your discomfort with conflict. As Jung noted, where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling. Your strategic silence allows you to align your external actions with your internal truth, to ensure that your responses arise not from habit or obligation, but from a centered place of authentic choice. This alignment creates a new kind of presence, one that's felt more powerfully in its occasional absence. When you speak from this centered place, your words carry the weight of discernment. When you engage from this sovereign state, your presence brings the gift of intention. When you love from this whole position, your connection offers the blessing of truth. Your silence becomes not a weapon to harm others, but a shield to protect yourself. Not a wall to block connection, but a filter to ensure that what passes through is worthy of your energy. Not a punishment for others' behavior, but a boundary that communicates your inherent value. The strategy of silence ultimately serves your becoming, your evolution into a being who is defined not by utility, but by integrity, not by availability, but by authenticity. There is a paradox at the heart of human connection. What is scarce becomes precious. What requires effort becomes valuable. What maintains mystery becomes magnetic. Jung understood this when he wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But this transformation cannot occur when you're constantly available, when you're entirely known, when you're completely accessible. The power of absence lies in creating the space for others to feel the impact of your presence by experiencing intervals of its withdrawal. Not as manipulation, but as a natural rhythm of authentic engagement. Consider the most respected people in your life. They likely share a common quality. They are not perpetually accessible. Their time feels valuable because they treat it as valuable. Their attention feels meaningful because they don't distribute it indiscriminately. Their validation carries weight because they don't offer it automatically. This selective presence isn't about playing games or creating artificial scarcity. It's about living with the genuine recognition that your energy is finite and must be allocated with wisdom. It's about honoring the truth that meaningful connection requires spaces between encounters, room for integration, reflection, and renewed appreciation. When you stop being available to everyone, something transformative happens. You become more valuable to the few who truly matter. Not because you're manipulating perception, but because you're embodying worth. You're demonstrating, through your boundaries, that access to your time, energy, and presence is something to be earned rather than expected. The quality of becoming mysterious isn't about being deliberately enigmatic or creating a false persona. It's about reclaiming the natural mystery that exists within every human being, but gets erased through excessive disclosure, habitual patterns, and constant availability. It's about remembering that you are multidimensional, too complex to be fully known through superficial interaction. Jung noted that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This becoming requires periods of retreat, intervals of silence, spaces of solitude, not to disconnect from others permanently, but to reconnect with yourself repeatedly, to ensure that who you present to the world emerges from authentic selfhood, rather than adaptive people-pleasing. As you practice the art of occasional absence, you'll notice a fascinating shift in your relationships. Those who valued you only for what you could provide will gradually fade away, unable to sustain interest without consistent utility. But those who value you for who you are will adapt to your boundaries, respect your rhythms, and appreciate the depth that emerges from your selective engagement. This natural filtering process isn't something you orchestrate, it's something you allow. By no longer being universally available, you create the conditions for discernment to operate naturally. Those who persist in seeking connection with you despite your boundaries are demonstrating something crucial, that they value your essence over your function. The revealing test is simple. Who continues to reach out without an agenda? Who respects your no without taking offense? Who sees your boundaries not as rejection but as self-respect? These are the individuals who recognize your inherent value rather than your instrumental utility. These are the connections worth nurturing. Your absence reveals another truth as well: how much of your interaction with others has been based on habit rather than intention, convenience rather than conviction, avoidance of discomfort rather than pursuit of meaning. When you withdraw, even temporarily, from these patterns, you create space to establish new ones based on choice rather than conditioning. Jung observed that the word happiness would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. Similarly, your presence loses its significance when it's not balanced by absence. Your voice loses its impact when it's not punctuated by silence. Your giving loses its meaning when it's not complemented by boundaries. This balance isn't just psychologically sound, it's energetically necessary. No natural system can sustain constant output without intervals of renewal. Your emotional and psychological resources are no different. By incorporating strategic absence into your way of being, you're not depriving others. You're ensuring that when you are present, you bring your full, replenished self. The power of absence extends beyond its effect on others. It transforms how you experience yourself. When you're no longer defined by your responsiveness to external demands, you discover the spaciousness of self-determination. When you're no longer measured by your availability to others, you find the freedom of self-directed purpose. This is not selfishness, it's sovereignty. Not isolation, it's intentionality. Not withdrawal from life, it's engagement on terms that honor your wholeness. Jung believed that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Your irritation with being constantly available is wisdom trying to emerge, the understanding that you were made for more than perpetual accessibility. As you practice the power of absence, you'll discover that true connection doesn't require constant contact. Real intimacy isn't built on incessant interaction. Genuine belonging doesn't demand perpetual presence. The relationships that survive your boundaries are precisely the ones worthy of your energy. The connections that enhance, rather than deplete your life force. Your absence isn't emptiness to be filled. It's presence to be earned. There comes a moment in the journey of reclaiming your energy when you face a profound threshold, the acceptance of temporary loneliness. Not the loneliness of abandonment, but the solitude of transformation. Not the isolation of rejection, but the sacred space of rebirth. This threshold marks the final passage from seeking external validation to embodying internal sovereignty. Jung understood this process when he wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because self-acceptance requires facing the parts of yourself that have been shaped by others' expectations, molded by others' needs, defined by others' perceptions. It means confronting the ways you've abandoned yourself to maintain connections that weren't serving your growth. When you first embrace conscious unavailability, you'll likely experience a period of disorientation. The familiar patterns of interaction will be disrupted. The habitual sources of validation will be limited. The comfortable roles you've played will be relinquished. And in this space of what seems like loss, something essential is being found. Your authentic center. This center cannot be located while you're constantly responding to external demands. It cannot be accessed while you're perpetually managing others' perceptions. It cannot be inhabited while you're continually sacrificing your truth to maintain superficial harmony. The regaining of your center requires a temporary withdrawal from the periphery of endless accommodation. In this withdrawal, you begin to experience clarity that was previously obscured by the noise of excessive engagement. You start to feel peace that was previously disturbed by the chaos of constant availability. You come to know a quality of presence with yourself that makes all future presence with others more genuine, more grounded, more true. Jung noted that who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. This awakening isn't always comfortable. You may discover how much of your identity has been constructed around being needed, being helpful, being the one who's always there. You may realize how many of your relationships have been built on what you provide rather than who you are. These realizations aren't meant to embitter you. They're meant to empower you, not through resentment of past patterns, but through clarity about future choices, not through rejection of all connections, but through discernment about which connections merit your continued investment, not through permanent isolation, but through selective engagement. As you continue this journey, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop seeking understanding from those who have repeatedly demonstrated they don't want to understand you. You cease explaining yourself to those who are invested in misinterpreting you. You release the exhausting effort of trying to be seen accurately by those who benefit from seeing you partially. This is not resignation, it's liberation, not defeat. It's discernment, not giving up on connection. It's becoming selective about where you invest your limited relational energy. Jung would call this individuation, the process of becoming psychologically individual, distinct, and undivided whole, rather than a fragmented people-pleaser. The rebirth that comes through this process isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you've always been, beneath the adaptations, beneath the accommodations, beneath the masks you've worn to secure approval. It's about reclaiming the sovereignty that is your birthright, but that has been gradually surrendered in the name of belonging. This reclamation doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds as you consistently choose your truth over temporary harmony, your long-term wholeness over short-term approval, your authentic expression over habitual accommodation. It develops as you practice saying no without excessive explanation, setting boundaries without apology, and valuing your energy as the precious resource it is. The maturity that emerges from this process is unmistakable, no longer needing everyone to understand you, no longer requiring universal approval to feel valid, no longer depending on constant external feedback to maintain internal stability. This is the hallmark of the individuated self, not isolated but distinct, not disconnected but discerning. Jung observed that the achievement of psychological maturity is an individual task, and so is increasingly difficult today when man has largely been transformed into a social function. Your rebirth is indeed an individual task, one that runs counter to a society that would prefer you remain a predictable function rather than a sovereign being. But this is precisely why the journey matters. Not just for your own liberation, but as a demonstration of another way of being. Each person who reclaims their energy, who honors their boundaries, who becomes intentional with their presence, creates a ripple effect. They give silent permission to others to do the same. Your rebirth isn't selfish, it's essential. Not just for your well-being, but for the authenticity of all your connections. Because when you engage from wholeness rather than lack, from choice rather than obligation, from sovereignty rather than dependency, you offer others the opportunity to meet the real you, not the accommodating function you've been performing. This is true intimacy, the meeting of authentic selves, rather than the interlocking of adaptive patterns. This is a real connection. The sharing of genuine presence rather than the exchange of emotional utilities. This is actual love, the recognition and celebration of sovereignty rather than the exploitation of availability. Your rebirth through conscious unavailability isn't the end of meaningful connection. It's the beginning of it, not with everyone, not indiscriminately, but with those who value who you are more than what you provide, who respect your boundaries as much as they enjoy your presence, who want your truth more than they want your compliance. As Jung reminded us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This becoming requires courage. The courage to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be temporarily alone. But on the other side of this courage lies liberation, the freedom to be authentic, to be selective, to be sovereign in a world that profits from your surrender. Your rebirth isn't just possible, it's already underway. Throughout history, the most respected, most impactful, most remembered individuals share a common quality. They weren't accessible to everyone. They weren't available for everything. They weren't defined by their utility, but by their integrity. They understood intuitively what Jung articulated psychologically, that true power emerges from self-containment, not from endless expansion. The path I've outlined isn't easy. It requires facing temporary discomfort for lasting liberation. It demands weathering criticism to achieve authenticity. It necessitates risking misunderstanding to attain true connection. But consider the alternative. A lifetime of being drained by those who see you as a resource, rather than a being, used by those who value your function over your essence, controlled by those who manipulate your reactivity. The choice before you isn't whether to continue as you are or to withdraw completely. It's whether to remain unconsciously available or to become consciously selective. It's whether to let your energy be directed by external demands or internal wisdom. It's whether to live from the center of others' expectations or from the core of your own truth. Jung observed that the best political, social, and spiritual work we can do is to withdraw the projection of our shadow onto others. This withdrawal begins when you stop projecting your need for approval onto others, when you cease making them responsible for your validation, when you release the expectation that your worth must be continuously confirmed by external sources. Your inaccessibility isn't rejection, it's renovation, not of others, but of yourself. The rebuilding of boundaries that have been eroded by excessive accommodation. The restoration of energy that has been depleted by constant availability. The reclamation of sovereignty that has been surrendered for approval. This renovation creates the conditions for the true connection. Connection based on mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation. Relationships founded on shared values rather than habitual dynamics. Intimacy built on authentic exchange rather than emotional exploitation. As we conclude this journey together, I invite you to begin your practice of conscious unavailability, not as a rejection of the world, but as a recommitment to yourself. Not as an escape from connection, but as a pathway to more meaningful engagement. not as a statement about others' worth, but as a declaration of your own value. If this message has resonated with you, if you feel called to reclaim your energy through strategic silence and conscious unavailability, write these words in the comments below. I choose to be sovereign. Let these words be not just a statement, but a commitment, the beginning of your journey from function to being, from utility to integrity, from constant availability to intentional presence. Remember, being inaccessible to those who drain you is how you become available to yourself. And that availability, that deep, consistent presence with your own truth, is the foundation of rebirth, the source of freedom, and the essence of an authentic life. Until then, protect your energy, honor your boundaries, choose your silence, and remember, your worth is not measured by your availability, but by your authenticity.